Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana M.A. and
Jackie Sanders. We are two art professionals sharing forth the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
we talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you will be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday.
So on today's episode, we're excited to share with you the journey that we believe every creative entrepreneur can relate to, and that's the creative business path. And to accompany this episode, we have created a free PDF about this topic, so make sure to download it at levelupartist.com.
And now this PDF really helps visualize the many possibilities and different directions that a creative career can take, because it can feel very overwhelming at times. So today we're going to break down kind of the 5 different stages of the creative business path. So no matter where you are on your creative journey, we've got some insight and action steps to help you level up your career.
Absolutely. So the first stage, and this is literally where everybody starts, we could think of it as the enthusiast slash hobbyist. This is when you're just starting out, this stage is all about curiosity, experimentation. It's the stage where you gather inspiration, you play with different, mediums, decide what you want to take further. So there are no wrong paths, of course, with all these different things we're discussing, but some of the things that make the stage stand out is this is one where you get to experiment freely. You get to try different mediums, different styles. You don't have to worry about perfection. Just think about it, when you were a kid, you were doodling a cartoon or maybe some anime, but then you also saw something, in a book or on the internet, and you're just like doodling everybody's like different things for inspiration. I mean, this is a great time. Also, as we're talking about these career paths, there's going to be some parallels to the creative evolution of your artwork as well. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap, but this is when you get to do whatever you want. I mean, it's just great. We love this stage. And this is also where you get to seek inspiration everywhere. Whether it's from other artists or you're out in nature, everyday experiences. I mean, it can be something as simple as, a wardrobe combination. It could be a cool pattern that you saw. It could be, something you saw in a book. I mean, you just get to take from everywhere, like input is just coming in from all directions at this stage.
Yeah, it's definitely that everything's exciting. You're trying so many different things, really trying to figure out your creative identity. And there's just like a lot of fun energy during this stage. This may also be when you start sharing your work, whether you post your art on social media, maybe share it with friends. It may still be on a personal Instagram account, not quite an art specific Facebook account or Instagram account yet. And it's a time when you also start thinking about why you're making art, whether you want to take it to that next level. It may be, well, this is just something I enjoy doing in the evenings as a way to relieve stress. You may start thinking about some creative business goals for down the line of, oh, that would be really cool to do one day. But that's one day, that's in the future. It's not right now. But those dreams start like trickling in of, oh, what would that look like? Which I think brings us to the goal for this creative career path. And why we wanted to share this PDF with you is so that you can have a better vision of establishing where you currently are on this path, to figure out where your focus should be, and then also having some element of a goal as to where to go next. As we talk about all the time on this podcast, that there's so many paths in which the creative career can take in terms of income streams or how you market your business. It's very personal to each individual artist, individual styles, regions in which you live. But having a general idea of this is the stage in which I'm at now, in order to level up to the next stage, this is what the differentiators are going to be, can be very helpful when you're trying not to do a level 5 in one area when you're still level 1 in another area, and it can feel very overwhelming, like a roller coaster. But after you started off in stage 1 as the enthusiast hobbyist, The next stage would be going into the emerging artist stage. Now, as an emerging artist, you're beginning to put yourself out there more consistently. Maybe you've sold a few pieces or participated in a few group community shows, having your work on display for others to see. And this stage is really all about taking yourself seriously and gaining that confidence in the idea that art could be more than just a hobby, right? You have those few small wins of putting your work out there, submitting to open calls, getting those wins under your belt of, hold on, maybe I really could do this more, which is a huge step from hobbyist. I would say this is honestly sometimes one of the hardest stages is going
Mhm.
from stage one to stage two, because it can be scary admitting like, oh, this is a goal that I have and I'm willing to be vulnerable enough to admit that and also do the work that it's going to take kind of on the back end, applying for calls, consistently sharing on your work out with the world. It can be super overwhelming. So if you are in the stage two path, congratulations. I'm very proud of you because that can be a really, really big step. Because another part of this level two emerging artist stage is getting involved locally. So selling your work at local events and markets, applying for those group exhibitions, which inevitably part of that means getting rejected from local markets, getting rejected from group exhibitions. And so there's that element of confidence that needs to come through the process. But a huge part of this is also connecting with other artists. So networking, building relationships with other artists in your community, which can be so rewarding. Maybe they're at the same stage as you are. Maybe they're still hobbyists. Maybe they're a level or two ahead of you. But learning about, okay, what are the local galleries that have group shows that I could apply for? Maybe there's a solo show opportunity that you want to put your name in the hat for. But learning about your local network, learning from other artists that are having similar goals to you is a huge part of that emerging artist, really establishing, okay, who are my creative coworkers in the area and how can we lean on each other and support each other?
Yeah, absolutely. And like Jackie said, I think this is like one of the hardest stages to move into. Depending what you're balancing, what stage of life you're in, what else you're balancing, work-wise, family-wise, and whatnot. It can be a little bit harder to get into this one, or may seem a little bit more overwhelming. But once you do, then you start realizing, or I feel like one of the biggest things, where it helps you realize this is when you go, oh, I sold this painting and it actually helped pay this bill, kind of situation. That's when things get real for me anyways, for the emerging stage. Another thing about the emerging artist stage is this is when you start to refine your style, right? It's less about I followed this tutorial from a YouTube video, which that's more of the enthusiast hobbyist stage, and now I'm actually going to take some of these different lessons and techniques that I've learned from others, right? Or through experimentation, and I'm going to start honing in on what am I all about? Like, do I paint everything or am I more botanical and pets? Am I more abstract? Like, what is your jam, essentially? So I feel like this is the stage when that starts coming out, and you start leaning towards specific mediums as opposed to maybe experimenting with everything, and trying to develop more of a cohesive style. This is not where you put pressure; everything has to look the same. But this is when some of those leanings come into, and you start to figure out what ties this work to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, right? Like you start kind of putting those threads together. I feel like this is also around the time where, as an artist, you start sharing more consistently. So, whether it's on social media where you're trying to build an audience and get some feedback, or maybe this is around the time you start going to crit groups. If you're not comfortable putting it online, you could go to crit groups, you could go to like different artist gatherings and start showing your work there, or do it in shows, etc. But this is like a little bit different. Like now it's not just I created a painting once a year situation. Now it's like, no, I paint every month or every week. And volume is not as important as consistency is. It's more like you are intentionally setting the time aside to work on this stuff. Like this is kind of like what starts helping you there. And honestly, this is the perfect tie-in into once you start noticing you're not just doing this sporadically, right? You're like putting more effort and time into this. That's when you start moving into the intermediate slash mid-level artist stage, which we love. I feel like this is probably the hardest one, but we'll get into that. It's like when you're a hobbyist, you do it for fun, right? Like anything goes. And then when you're emerging, you're starting to get the feel for it, but it's still like very new and very exciting. And then when you get intermediate, I feel like this is like where part of the grindy part comes in, where you're just like, okay, I'm starting to gain traction. Sales are a little bit more consistent, but they can still be a little volatile, a little up and down. Your style has, started to emerge. People are starting recognizing your pieces. And now that you're like, okay, great. So people buy paintings, but in between paintings, like, or in between exhibitions, like, how else do I help pay my bills with my art? And with all of these examples we're giving, by the way, it's not necessary for you to be full time, by the way. This is still something you can balance with a full time or a part time job in something else. But to give you an idea, yeah, of course, the more time you have to devote to this, perhaps the little faster you can move into these things. So, this is when you start thinking about efficiency, you start thinking about income streams. One of the first things that you're going to have to work through for this stage is creating a sustainable rhythm. So, when you're coming out of emerging, you might just be going 500 miles an hour, but you'll quickly learn burnout is a thing. And you have to develop a workflow that avoids the burnout. Like, it's okay to crank out and produce, but you also need time to rest, refill the creative tank. It does run out, and your body gets exhausted. Like there's other things that come into play that you need to consider, and this is when you start learning about that. And then the other thing, of course, and you've heard us talk about it a lot on the podcast, is you have to diversify your income. You have to explore additional revenues streams. Maybe you're going to teach workshops. Maybe you're going to sell prints. Maybe you're going to do murals as and paintings and sculptures. Like this is when you start, oh, maybe you're going to sell stuff through one of those website marketplaces that does t-shirts and curtains and hats. Like this is when you start looking at, besides my main art, item, which in our case we're saying paintings, but it depends what your main art, outlet is. What else can you do, especially in between your sales of your main thing, which like in our case it's like visual art, of course. So yeah, those are some of the things that definitely you're like, oh, maybe I'm in the intermediate level now. Wow.
Exactly. And even just hearing about all the different income streams, you may be thinking, okay, well, that's getting clearly a little bit more complex, right? That's really where that intermediate level, I think, is so different, is that everything is fundamentally the same, but just more complex. So, like times five. And that comes with also needing more organization in your practice. So, whether it's organizing your art inventory, because maybe as an emerging level, you're like, well, I have these handful of paintings or a collection or two. Of course, I know where all of my paintings are. I have these two shows up, which is so exciting, and I know exactly which paintings are in them. But once you get to that intermediate phase, which is a wonderful problem to have, is you honestly start kind of losing track of how many total paintings you've made, which ones are in which exhibition, and when does that show come down? Can I use a painting from that show to apply to a different one that's not till later?
Mhm.
Like it's a lot of that organization that needs to happen, and also finances. If you're making more sales, you need more financial organization, doing the sales tax portion of it. Really making sure that your admin tasks are at kind of that max efficiency or as organized as you can make them, because that's what is going to make your future life so much easier. Um, and also having that element of making sure that you're thinking about constantly challenging yourself too. I think it can be very easy to kind of quote unquote stick with what you know from a safety standpoint. But asking yourself, okay, should I start thinking about other projects to take on that might grow a specific skill that I've wanted to learn or get out of my comfort zone? Maybe it's a community collaboration opportunity that you wouldn't necessarily have had before as a hobbyist or emerging artist, but through your network, through growing a presence in your community, you have opportunities where you can really challenge yourself. Can be very exciting as an intermediate artist. So all things just to think about. It's almost like you're an emerging artist times 5/10 in this element. It's not just one painting series. It's, to your point, Adriana, it's your painting series and your sculpture series and your art product line and this and that. They're like, okay, it's the same stuff, but just times five.
A lot more complicated, yeah.
Yeah. And then from the stage three intermediate mid-level artist stage, you kind of evolve into stage four, which is you're an established artist. So in this stage, you've kind of built a business that is able to support you both financially and emotionally, and whatever that means for you. Again, everyone gets to define what that means. You're able to balance multiple income streams and starting to work potentially with assistants or interns to help you manage that workload. So you're really starting to teeter to the point of a more quote unquote formal business, in terms of having maybe a virtual assistant, someone who helps. Okay, I have artwork coming down from a group show. Can you drive up, pick it up, and then bring it back to the studio for me? Right? Delegating wisely, in order to free up more of your time to invest in creative work. Because when you're in that established artist phase, and even honestly, in stage three as intermediate artists, there are countless and endless like admin tasks that you can always be doing, from updating inventory to marketing to networking. And these are all inherently not making the work itself. It's everything else that needs to happen on the
Mhm.
business side, which can be very rewarding and is what kind of keeps the wheel turning. But ultimately, you are the one that needs to be making the work if that's how your business is structured. So delegating wisely is super important. And you may be potentially seeking representation and press opportunities. So that is a form of delegation in a way, is if you have a gallery that represents your work, or if you have a local news outlet that highlights your work, so that rather than you having to network with 50 different potential collectors in your area, if there's an article that's written about you and your work that's distributed to 5,000 people, that's a very efficient way of networking with people that you've never met with before. So starting to think a bit more creatively on how you can offload some of the work and not having to do every little piece yourself. So working smarter and harder at the same time.
But more efficient. Yeah, and I love that. And this is also, in line with what you just discussed about press and things like that. You can get this kind of attention once you have a style, because then also what could happen is some of these stages and some of these actions we're talking about, if they're taken too early and you get known too early for a thing that it's not fully developed yet, then you may get stuck in a niche or in a style that you didn't even want to do in the first place, right? It was just like an experimental phase. So that's why this is good. This is like it builds upon time. One of the things that also builds upon time is consistent production. So we mentioned earlier, you don't want to go so fast that you burn out all the time, because that's not going to help. But if you have a little bit more of a focus on consistently creating high quality work you're proud of, then all these different, representation opportunities, publicity opportunities, like, you have the work to back it up. It's not just hype, right? It's like people see it and they go, I saw this in a magazine, a couple years ago. Now I look at your website, you're still doing the same kind of high quality caliber work, not they fell off the face of the planet and they haven't posted in years, right? So it's like it's important to continue with this, and also to build those audience relationships. This is when it becomes extremely, extremely important that you continue to focus on growing your audience sustainably. It's not just about volume; it's literally about the quality of the folks that are following you and how involved they are in what you're doing, fostering those genuine connections with your collectors. They're not just passive scrollers on a social media platform. They're actually interested in seeing, when's your next opening, when's your next exhibition, what's your next body of work going to look like? Is there content about what the inspiration is behind this thing? Can I commission you for a piece for our home, right? Like, this is when this kind of little relationship, flourishes. Um, but yes, anyways, so this is stage four. Next up, we're going to talk about the fifth stage and how it ties into community. But first, let's put in a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our Level Up Artist resources.
We understand that life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Plus, there's a lot of information out there, but what do visual artists actually need?
We've spent countless hours of trial and error, weeding through tons of information to find the gold so that you don't have to waste time going down those endless rabbit holes.
We created a library of PDF resources with bonus videos that cover everything from artist documents to exhibition prep, social media to technology, sales strategies, and artist mindset, several templates, and more.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartist.com/shop to level up your creative career today.
Welcome back, everybody. So, stage 5. The boss level. This is when you're running your creative business with confidence. I feel like this is like a big goal for a lot of us. You have confidence, you have tempered ambitions. You're taking on major projects. Perhaps you're at this stage even mentoring other artists. You're continuously, pushing your practice to new heights. I feel like this is obviously it is a moving target, of course, as everything in art and creative careers, but it's a great one, to kind of work towards. So at this stage, most likely you're working with a team. You've built a team over the years that understands your vision, helps you manage various aspects of your business. You may have someone that's helping you with social media. You have a photographer or videographer that you trust. You have somebody else that's helping you with press. I mean, sometimes it is just one other person that's doing all these things, but a lot of times at this stage, you are going to have, different team members dedicated to different parts of your business, and they're helping you grow these different parts. So you can focus on the one thing that nobody can replace, and it's your artistic vision, right? And what you're producing. This is also a great time when, folks are streamlining their revenue streams. You're optimizing which income sources are actually working for you, which ones need to be either put on the back burner or paused or eliminated, right? And which ones do you want to actually focus on and go harder at and try to find a balance between them. You don't want to do all the things at once. You just kind of like balance out which ones actually work the best for you and your vision for your creative business.
Yeah, and I think one of the most beneficial portions of this level is also, of course, as we talk about a lot on this podcast, giving back to other artists. So having that element of potentially mentoring or inspiring other, whether emerging artists, even hobbyists, by sharing your knowledge with them, providing guidance and mentorship, whether in a formal, structured capacity or even informal. Having these larger projects that you're able to pursue and take on that excite you to where you can not only push yourself in your own boundaries, but also maybe lend a hand to someone who's in a different stage with you to show them an experience, kind of lift them up as you are rising in your creative career can be super, super important. Because ultimately that growth happens when you're out of your comfort zone. And having a community that you can lean on is something that also helps each of us grow, which is something that we wanted to take a few moments to highlight before we wrap up today's episode. No matter what level you are at, whether you are a hobbyist, whether you're emerging, intermediate, an established artist, or that boss level where you're making your art empire, all of these rely on having a strong sense of community and ideally being able to celebrate and lift up other artists along the way, right? By shifting your mindset of seeing other artists' successes as good for the larger community rather than seeing it as competition, that shift in mindset can really transform how you engage with others in the art world and reduce those feelings of comparison, sulking, feeling bad for yourself, and really seeing it as inspiring what's possible. And of course, there's going to be oh, I'm so excited to be able to do that one day. Let's say if you're an emerging artist at level 2, looking up to an established artist at level 4, saying, oh, wow, not just, oh, why do they get to do that? I should be the one doing that, quote unquote, but rather seeing it as, wow, how exciting that artists in our area are given opportunities like that I'm excited for the day when I will be able to do something like that. Seeing it as
Hmm.
what is possible and not just a scarcity mindset. And this really comes from sharing it forward at whatever level you're at. So surrounding yourself with artists who inspire you, creating that environment where you can share your progress without judgment, celebrate each other's wins, and acknowledge that those accomplishments for other artists are the successes of the whole. And don't diminish your individual potential or the space in which you can rise. Realistically, it actually grows opportunities for the future, and allows you to see what is possible, which is very exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Racing tides and all that, as they say.
Hmm.
This also allows you, by staying connected with your community to share challenges by sharing both your struggles and your wins, you create deeper, more meaningful conversations and connections that remind you that everybody faces similar challenges. It helps to keep you humble too, to remember you were once at that stage too, right?
Hmm.
And just because you're more established or boss level doesn't mean you can't learn from someone that's in their early stages of their career, right? It's literally symbiotic. It's a give and take. So it's beautiful and it helps others coming along the way also come up. So think of it as collaboration instead of competition, as you hear us say all the time, of course. This can help you look for opportunities for collaboration with other artists, whether it's a joint project, maybe it's an exhibition, maybe it's just sharing an idea. Maybe there's something you've had in the back burner forever and you meet the perfect person to execute that idea and you just go, here you go. Like, you do it. Like, I'd like this idea to come to life, but based on my commitments, it probably won't happen or it might be years from now. But you're excited. I love the energy. Like, how about we do this thing together? Or how about I just give you this? Or have you heard of this opportunity? Like making those connections, that collaboration fosters creativity, reduces that need of comparison, like Jackie said, but it's not just for them, it's for you too, right? It can keep you fresh, it can keep you with more things coming, it can help along in your own evolution as well. So don't think of it as one sided, but I'm just giving it to them. No, people gave to you. So this is how you give back and you keep it in the system. Let's kind of put it that way, helping out. So just remember, of course, as we go through this, power of community in the art world definitely can't be underestimated. Being part of a supportive community can remind us that everybody's journey is different. Success is not a zero-sum game. This is not a pie that, this is an infinite pie, guys. Like, this is not but they got this and now I can't do it because they already did it. No, there's unlimited opportunities. So, let's just keep building each other up, create without fear, let's grow together for sure.
Exactly. And hopefully this guide can help you see these different stages, but ultimately remembering that everyone's journey is different. It's not always a linear path. You may go from one stage and then take a step backwards and then move forward again. But having these stages as a visual can help you take action, that resonates with you and where you are in your creative journey, while also staying inspired with what is possible moving forward. So make sure to visit levelupartist.com to get your free PDF of the creative business path to help inspire you for what is to come in your future career.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, and we hope you enjoyed this conversation.
As always, our blog will be linked in today's show notes, where you will find episode notes and links to all of our other podcast episodes.
If you want to stay connected with us in between episodes, share feedback, or have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, you can reach us on social media. I'm Anime Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio on all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Level Up Artist on Instagram.
Make sure to visit levelupartist.com, get immediate access templates, resources, and free PDFs like the one we mentioned today.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.